I'm the glue and paper guy. Today, all the top shelf toys are out and thrown around in 100 different places. We're preparing for the donation of the Saturn V's that occupied that empty hole. A new version of the ATST rises from the ashes. There's a story there, and I'll share it. Turns out my S1B was actually SA-205 for Apollo 7, and I built a new base for him when he is donated to the local elementary school where they will use him in a classroom. These absurd guns are going to go on my blue friend. The reason that Saturns are leaving is what you see right here. That's a 72nd scale Apollo stack, magnetized together, very high detail, high gain bends, the whole bit. And it is part of this diorama, which will ultimately contain a lot of fun Apollo toys. Prototype 2 of the ATST is fully stacked himself. And his story, blue as he is a little different than you might think. We're back on the workbench again. This is shaky cam central. This plastic table moves quite a bit, but it has a lot of area, and I can make a thoroughgoing mess of it if I please to. What you see here is the final cuts, 4 pages, big ones. These are larger than 8.5 by 11, of all the parts that go into the head of our friend Mr. ATST. There's the main structure here, and these parts are actually, the sprue just melts. First time I've taken them all the way out of this one. That's what happens when you use a SVG file and the right cut formula for your material. 8 cuts with a 0.2 point. A 0.2 point. You know, points are a measure of the size of type. 100 points, 10 points, 72 point to the inch. Something all the way back to the printing press. I got a 0.2 point line. SVG files don't care about fill. Took me a long time to figure that out. It's a lot easier to see the thing if you fill the shapes. And then arrange them on a cut sheet. And the final thing is, if you put a tiny little cut right at the corner of each corner, the SVG interprets that as a single image. And then we get the perfection that you see here. And you'll notice that there's like barely any garf on my hands. And I was wearing gloves when I was working on this last. That was so much garf it was inescapable. If you look very, very carefully at the source, you'll see that there is actually a series of little pits, and that's my best guess as to the count. That's 12 around the edge of the gun nacelle. And I didn't figure that out until late in the game, and I decided to go ahead and put them in here. Interesting demonstration of the screaming accuracy and precision of that laser. Yes, it has a kerf. No, it ain't very big. You know, you can see my hand through that a few places. It just burned away that material totally. But those are my marks where I'll put layer 3 detail. What seems to be surfacing in this thing is layer 1, layer 2, additional detail on top of the structure, and then layer 3. We had a meal service for a while and got these marvelous bottles. That's my collection of every 6.2 millimeter diameter center, carefully preserved in one thing, just to, maybe someday I'll build a giant Nautilus. These are all of the layer 3 parts, the pieces of paper cut with the laser. This jar is the tiniest of those. And that's more than enough to do the work. Shaky cam again, sorry. More than enough to do the work, but separate it out so it's easier for me to do the actual assembly. The tiniest of those parts, demonstrates the capacity of the laser to do what it does. I didn't make stock and cut those to size or any old thing. All those bazillion itty bitty squares are cut with the laser, and somewhere in here are 24 teeny tiny itty bitty bolt heads. They're going to go around those port and starboard gun nacelles. You know, it's a science fiction movie. It's got to have nacelles, right? So why, oh why, says you, would I print or make or paint an ATST blue? And working with Ken makes one want to, you know, do diorama stuff because he's very good at it, and seeing what he does is just marvelous. Now we have 3 bases. You know, the original scope of the project was there's only going to be one, yada, yada, yada. Well, I got this idea, and I'm working up to it, honest I am. That feels like Terminator, doesn't it? Well, that's the intent. The 11mm skulls are on scale for a 20 scale model, and this is about 21 scale, based on my numbers. The internet says that an ATST is about 30 foot tall. This is 17 foot tall. 17 inches, excuse me. Feels like 17 feet sometimes. The whole idea of I want it to come out. I want it to break the borders and come out in your face. So you see all the hair sort of combed toward the front. And some of the parts are, you know, familiar. That's a barrel from the I didn't use on the original, and you recognize that little metatarsal wheel there. Some of my marvelous gearhead there. This is my paper clay again. Here's the curse of the paper clay. It's going to dry, it's going to crack. Should have covered it with a bit of paper or something and let it dry more slowly. Could have used sculpting techniques, clay sculpting techniques, made a slurry of the clay, put it in here. That's called slip. When you build pottery, and you know, you put the ears on the rabbit, you use slip to glue the 2 pieces together. That slurry of water and water-soluble clay and clay. Should have done that. Could have covered it. Ken's suggestions are very strongly represented in the coloring here. I did not try to make this dirt for dirt because I wanted it to be, you know, the bottom of the blast crater of some horrendous explosion. I did not color the brick, again, because I wanted to stay with that nearly monochromatic. This event occurs in a place that has been fought over back and forth for years, generations, and is so crowded with crap that any semblance of life is long since pounded out of it. Hence, you know, none of my little scrubby wiry trees, which I put on the other base. So, still haven't articulated it. Here's the deal. The guys in the Terminator are always behind the 8 ball. They're killing robots with pickup trucks. That seems infinitely one-sided. Therefore, I gave them an ATST with an absurd freaking minigun. Look at that. Makes you cringe just staring down the barrel of that bad boy, doesn't it? Well, here's another trick. This one, yeah, this is the thing. That's some very subtle lasering, my friends. Okay, if 8 runs cut through, 5 runs leave material behind. So you suck it up, you spend an hour and a half drawing this grid, and you thicken the lines, the perpendicular lines, right? And you thin out the longitudinal ones. You cut it 5 times. It turned out these parts pretty much dropped out of there anyway, but it also succeeded in the way that I wanted. I got flexible paper. I got ammo belts. And if you think I ain't thrilled to death by that, you just... And, all right, this is where the trolls come in. I had to stop and think. I understand guns. And the bullets go in and the casings come out. I didn't really design that into this. I mean, this was the intent, was this absurd thing to make a diorama. But I did stop and think at the end. So there's the ejector. Probably not in a good position for this because it should waist below the belt. But I don't suppose they care. They want to put lead down range. Enough of that layer 3. Here again, layer 3 detail. Layer 1, structure. Layer 2, heavy detail. More on that in a minute. Layer 2. Then layer 3. That's all paper. I cheated. Styrene tubing. Best because they're gun barrels. This one's fun. I needed those. That's strips cut out of a Post-it note. Although in the final kit I will provide, pieces of paper to do that work. And then the rings slip over. They're so precisely cut that they have room for the paper and slip over. And these I barely cleaned up at all. I ran a file over the outside of them, I think, a touch. I was less concerned about that on this one than I might be on the final finished one, and I'm still seeing the final finished one is somewhat troubled. I'm convinced now that those things on the back of an ATST are some kind of muffin fan. Well, I had to fake me a muffin fan. So there's a piece of paper on the bottom, then a circle, then these blades, a piece of dowel, and some layer 3 detail. It's probably layer 2, really, it's thick. Toasted on top. These are not symmetrical on my source. This is crooked, my fault. Another trick, that's a flat piece of paper, 2 layers, the bottom, the inside layer, how much you can see of that. The inside layer has a cutout to accept the piece of paper. The outside layer is a cap. And boy, did that work like a champ. I really should have videoed this, and I may, when I'm constructing the final here, I may do that. Because what I was doing was I was gooping these up with glue, with a pair of pliers, and balancing them on a carefully marked off circle. I was back to gluing paper edge to edge, a thing that always astounded my father, and I didn't realize I couldn't do it, so I did it. This post will go in the body, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment. That is house wire. Later on I realized that this is not a very good finish, so I have rings. So on the final there'll be rings at the end of these, and it looks like it goes into something. This is the entirety of a body. Interesting to paint when you've already assembled it, but the point to this was, the whole Terminator business is fun, but the point was to prototype it yet again as I refined what I want ultimately to have something that I can give to my friends as a kit. So what we get, a really bad perspective here, and I'll cut in some later, is that all sits on there. And then Mr. Macho here sticks out. As we proceed further with this, I need to finish out this. And I got some styrene tubing. We're going to make a cannon. And I have an idea to sort of perpetuate this. I'm going to make banana clips. And I'm going to put something inside them. And the freaking banana clips will be the rounds for the absurdly stupid cannon sticking out the front. Finally wrapped up with successively gray and black camouflage striping. And I'm going to have a big star on here with a skull in the middle of it, USMC. And USMC, whatever, some nomenclature of some kind. And I haven't gelled this trick totally, and I don't know the phrase. But yet, I don't know what I'm going to say yet. But I imagine this like a World War II munitions man chalking to Hitler with love on his bomb. Somewhere across this, you know, to bring home the Terminator thing, I want this to say, you know, the equivalent of to Hitler with love in some appropriate words. Suggestions accepted, ladies and gentlemen. These guys will have a page in the final kit, but, you know, that's your choice if you want to do that or not. Some subtlety on the hatch. Better execution on the next one. However, you'll notice that's not round. It's ovoid, to allow the hatch to rotate up and press against the back of that. And the hatch, this hatch I'm not going to bother with, but it wants more layer 3 detail. I'll probably give it a handle. These are the ports, the holes. You know, the stick it in holes, just like a styrene model for the railing. I'll do that the same as I did on the original, you know, all styrene, and I'll just stick it right down in. The filming miniature has little braces here in each place. And if you look at that filming miniature at that scale, you begin to see nuts and bolts, and it's obvious that the scale of the thing. Really thrilled with this. I don't have any window screen. I need some fine window screen, just a little hunk of it to make those vents. I'm thinking about going to one of my local home stores and charming them. See if I can get, you know, 2 inches of fine mesh screen. We proceed. Welcome to another episode of How Not to Paint a Model. I have the Mark II prototype here, and I want camouflage stripes on my Terminator. I assembled him to make sure that he worked. I've never done this. I have no earthly notion what I'm doing, but I will tell you, I have figured out the exact hardest way to do this. I'm carving up stripes of blue tape, and I'm going to throw it on here. I'm going to use every ounce of the experience with an airbrush that I do not have and try to spray a couple of different colors of gray in here. We've more or less decided on a palette. Where are they? There they are. There's the base color, and then a blue-gray and a graphite. The layer that I'm laying on now I want to be whiter, so I'm going to do the blue-gray, and then the thinner stripes will be graphite. I've decided on questing for some sort of military green to make the final graphics on this thing that I want to have on it. Well, I screwed around with a bunch of different ways to do this. I quite deliberately did not go on YouTube to try to find anything. I have no guidance. I don't have any earthly idea of what I'm doing. I want to camouflage. I've never built a tank. I've never camouflaged a tank. So I tried this idea. And, you know, I might use something like this on the head. Just cross your fingers and hold it up and shoot it with the airbrush. And it might work, because I have this idea for these. I want this wideness here over the head. I got a lot in frame and working on a short focal length, but you get the idea. That's, yeah, and I want it to be consistent. But this guy, I realized if I was going to shoot the mask, just by holding it up, I'd be blowing paint over the rest of the model, which is just not acceptable. So it's time for some Christmas wrapping. And the whole idea then is these sort of diagonal things. I'm not going to go all the way tiger stripe. I want blotchy, but with some flow. And I guess in the end, I'm just going to tape them up like this and go berserk with the blue tape until the whole surface is fully covered. Then cross my fingers, blow some paint, and hope for the best. Wish me luck. I don't know what I got, but this ham-handed attempt is what's going to lay on the next color. As I got through it, of course, you get more sophisticated. I realized that if I started slitting the long strips of the wide tape, I could block off big areas and get the smaller stripes in them after. There's obviously going to be some crisscrosses and some misses and I don't know what. I know more now, and it'll be easier to do the dark color because of that. Let's see what we get. More clarity on the feet simply because of the shape, and obviously this thing would have been easier to accomplish if I'd done it, in several sub-assemblies. Well, we're not camouflaging any more ATSTs. This is a one-off because I wanted to do something with the second prototype. It occurs to me I could show off something else. I keep talking about, structure and then layer 2 detail and layer 3 detail. So structure, the plates, and layer 2 detail, stuff like this, and then layer 3 detail is the little tiny things that would normally have come out of someone's Greebly box, but were each individually laser cut in my case. You can see some more of it there on the edge. These things actually exist on the filming miniature. These little half circle divots. We've decided this is a rail gun. There's the rings and the transfer bars and the top of capacitors and stuff like that. Well, there's that concept again. Structure and then the second layer and a third layer of detail. To make it into something. It always threes with me. I don't know quite why. But there's an ease and a symmetry, and it does, once done in 3 layers of detail, structure, a second layer of detail, a third layer of detail, that's faithfully close to the original, and presents an amount of detail that sells it pretty well. So 3 layers, and I have the armor plates for over here, and that kind of thing, and I'm gonna have to hand paint those later on. This is where the weird graphics gonna go. So I'm gonna blow some paint, and we'll see where we get out of it. I just thrilled to death with that minigun, and who knows where that'll show up again. I can say with absolute authority that I now know how to properly construct the guns for dorsal and ventral Millennium Falcons. That will no longer be a problem. Sarah's Revenge. Right in the middle of my brand new Star Trek themed shelves for the set wall. She'll keep that place until I fill her with something new. Upcoming, I've got 2, maybe 3 ideas percolating in my head, and we are ready to roll.